You wake up exhausted. Your muscles ache and burn as if you just ran a 10-mile marathon, even though you only walked to the bathroom. You go to the doctor, and they tell you your blood work is normal and that it might just be depression. But what if your pain isn't in your head? What if the microscopic batteries inside your muscle cells have literally died? Today, we expose the biological truth of fibromyalgia. This video is for educational purposes only. Fibromyalgia can be severely debilitating, and chronic pain should always be managed with a qualified healthcare professional. Never abruptly stop your prescribed pain medications or antidepressants without a doctor's supervision. And if you have lived this, I want to say something clearly. Your experience is real. The fatigue is real. The pain is real. The brain fog is real. Fibromyalgia is not a character flaw, and it is not proof that you are weak, lazy, or broken. What many people are never told is that fibromyalgia is not diagnosed by a single blood test. Routine labs can be normal, because clinicians usually diagnose it by history, physical exam, and tests used to rule out other conditions. The absence of a clear lab abnormality does not mean the symptoms are imaginary. In medical terms, one major explanation for fibromyalgia involves central sensitization. The nervous system becomes too efficient at amplifying pain. That means a light touch, ordinary movement, or a normal day can feel like an emergency to the body. And for people living with ME, CFS, the exhaustion syndrome that often overlaps with fibromyalgia, the CDC describes it as a biological illness, not a mindset problem. There is still no confirmatory test, but researchers are actively investigating biological abnormalities, including mitochondrial dysfunction and disrupted energy production. So if you have been told, everything looks normal, but your life tells a completely different story, do not let that sentence erase your reality. Normal routine testing does not mean your suffering has no biological basis. It means the root cause may be deeper than the standard checklist. In the next section, we go inside the cell itself, and I'll show you why a drained energy system can make your body feel like it is running on fumes all day long. Now let us go one level deeper, because this is where the picture starts to make sense. Inside nearly every cell in your body are tiny structures called mitochondria. They are not just parts of the cell. They are the main site where your body turns food and oxygen into usable energy, and that energy is packaged into a molecule called ATP, the cell's spendable energy currency. In plain English, ATP is what lets a muscle contract, a nerve fire, and a cell keep doing its job. When people say they feel like they are running on empty, that is not just a metaphor. It is a biologically accurate description of what energy deficiency can feel like at the cellular level. Mitochondria generate the majority of the ATP your body uses, and ATP is constantly consumed for muscle contraction, ion transport, and nerve signaling. When ATP supply is strained, everything downstream starts to feel harder, heavier, and more expensive to the body. Now here is the part that matters. In fibromyalgia, researchers have reported signs of mitochondrial dysfunction and impaired energy metabolism in at least some studies. But this is still an evolving area of science, not a single universally accepted explanation for every case. In other words, the evidence suggests that the energy system may be under strain, but we should describe that carefully and honestly. And that is why this theory resonates so deeply with real sufferers. If the body does not make enough ATP, tissues that depend on constant energy can feel like they are fighting uphill all day long. The brain notices the strain. The muscles notice the strain. Even rest may not feel restful, because the system is trying to operate with too little fuel. So when I say, dead battery, I am using a metaphor to describe a real energy crisis at the cellular level. In the next section, we are going to follow that energy shortage into the muscle itself. And this is where the burning, tight, I can barely move, feeling starts to make even more sense. Now we get to the part that explains the burning, the tightness, and that strange feeling like your muscles are trapped in a permanent exercise session. When cells cannot make enough ATP through normal oxygen-based metabolism, they do not simply shut off, they adapt. And one emergency adaptation is to rely more heavily on anaerobic metabolism, basically a backup mode that does not produce energy as efficiently. In that backup mode, the body produces lactate and other metabolic byproducts much more quickly, especially when demand is high and oxygen-dependent energy production is not keeping up. That shift can contribute to the heavy, cramped, burning sensation people describe. So when someone with fibromyalgia says, "My muscles feel like I just did intense squats for an hour," that is not a random complaint. It is a signal that the energy system is under strain and the tissue is being pushed into a stress chemistry it never asked for. Now I want to be careful and precise here. Lactate is not a toxic waste villain by itself, and the science is more nuanced than the old-fashioned, lactic acid is bad, story. But the larger point still stands. When energy production is insufficient, the muscle environment changes, fatigue rises, and the body starts to interpret ordinary movement like a threat. That is why even resting can feel physically punishing. The system is not weak, it is trying to survive with too little energy. So the real takeaway is this: your muscles are not making it up. They are reacting to an internal energy crisis. And once you understand that, the next question becomes obvious. How do we help the cell make energy again, instead of just numbing the alarm? In the next section, I will show you the raw materials that support ATP production and why the goal is not just pain relief, but restoring cellular function. Here is the shift in strategy. You cannot simply mute a warning light and call that healing. If the cell is underpowered, then the body needs support at the level of energy production. That is why certain nutrients are discussed in this space, not as magic bullets, and not as cures, but as raw materials and cofactors the body uses to make ATP more efficiently. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of enzyme systems, including processes tied to muscle and nerve function, and it is also central to ATP chemistry. CoQ10 sits in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, where it helps move electrons during energy production. D-ribose is a sugar involved in rebuilding the ribose backbone used in ATP synthesis. Now, I want to be intellectually honest with you. The evidence for these nutrients is supportive, not absolute, and people respond differently. But the biological logic is straightforward. If ATP generation is strained, then giving the cell the cofactors it uses to build energy is a rational place to start. The goal is not to force the body into overdrive. The goal is incremental biological optimization. Better mitochondrial support, less cellular friction, and a little more capacity to function before the day is gone. That is also why many people layer in a gentle, clinician-guided nervous system support protocol, because energy restoration and nerve calming often need to happen together. In the next section, we move from rebuilding the battery to calming the alarm system. Because when the nerves have been firing for too long, pain can stay loud even as the body starts to recover. Even when you start supporting cellular energy, there is another layer that has to be addressed: the nervous system itself. In fibromyalgia, one of the best described mechanisms is central sensitization, which means the brain and spinal cord can stay in a hyper-alert state and amplify pain signals far beyond the original stimulus. In practical terms, the alarm system becomes too sensitive. Ordinary touch can feel sharp. Minor strain can feel catastrophic. And the body can begin reacting as if danger is everywhere, even when nothing dangerous is happening. That is why many people do not improve by trying to push through pain. When the nervous system has learned chronic threat, it can keep firing pain signals long after the original trigger is gone. This is not weakness. It is neurobiology. And because of that, any serious support plan has to respect both sides of the problem: the cellular energy deficit and the overprotective pain signaling. This is also where a gentle, clinician-guided neurological support formula can fit into the picture. Not as a miracle. Not as a replacement for medical care. But as part of a broader strategy to support calmer signaling while the body is rebuilding resilience. That may include nutrients or botanical ingredients chosen for nerve support, along with sleep, stress reduction, and pacing. Magnesium is one example of a nutrient with an established role in nerve transmission and neuromuscular function, although research on supplementation for fibromyalgia is mixed rather than definitive. So if you are using a protocol like Nervigen Pro, or anything similar, the right mindset is this: treat it as support for the alarm system, not a substitute for proper care. And never stop your prescribed medications abruptly. Work with a qualified healthcare professional, stay patient with the process, and focus on incremental improvement in energy, pain, and quality of life. This is how you move from survival mode back toward function. This video is educational only, and it is not a substitute for individualized medical advice.